And I'm back. Gordon Causey, Gordy Canuck, you like, as it always is, doing an impromptu live. We'll see if anyone jumps on, see if anyone gets notified and is still awake, because right now it is 10 minutes to 5 a.m. on this. Now we are into the 29th, the day after the election. And the results are pretty much done. Uh, what we're looking at, I'll share my screen, and anyone showing up can play at double speed if they like. I sound far more intelligent when I'm talking 100 miles an hour going at double speed. Let's see, share screen. And these are the results as published by CBC, but they're the same everywhere. Let me make sure that my screen is sharing. There we have it. We have the Liberals leading or elected in 168 ridings, the Conservatives at 144, the Bloc Québécois, Yves-François Blanchet, his party, one is at 23, and the New Democrats only 7. Green Party just one. No other party elected, no independents. That's the size of it right there. I haven't done the math. I haven't added that up. Does that add up to 343? I imagine it does. 168 plus, clear my calculator, 168 plus 144 plus 23 plus 7 plus 1, 343. And that's where we are. And this is significant because, and it gets complicated. The Liberals at 168 have more seats than the Conservatives and Bloc combined. You add 144 to 23. I'll double check my math, but I make that out to be 167. That's exactly what it is. 167. The Liberals have one more. That means that even if the Conservatives and the Bloc Québécois, even if they join forces to vote against Liberal legislation or to put forward a motion of no confidence, they don't have the votes. But it gets tricky because the House has to elect a speaker. And the speaker most often comes from the government side of the House of Commons. And so the Speaker of the House is, in all likelihood, going to be a Liberal, and the Speaker does not vote. And now you have a situation where it's tied 167 to 167, a tie. And I would bet dollars to donuts, to use that old expression. SRCX is saying 172. That would be what is needed for a majority. The Liberals have fallen short. And looking at the results, I was looking at them earlier, and the Liberals at that time were at 167. And that one extra seat means a lot because it gives the Liberals on the doorstep of a majority. And the New Democratic Party has lost official party status. I'd have to look at the specific ridings that they won, but I imagine that you're looking at individuals who won by very narrow margins. And they're not going to, a sitting NDP member is not going to be anxious to defeat the government and potentially lose their very lucrative job. I don't know exactly how much an MP earns, but in terms of salary, benefits, and perks and everything, I'm confident in saying it's punching up somewhere around $250,000 a year, 250,000 or thereabouts. And is an NDP member going to want to risk losing their seat by siding with the Conservatives and the Bloc? Because that's what it would take at this point, is that the Conservatives, the Bloc, and the New Democrats, all three would have to join together. So in a fashion, while it's not a majority technically, you can almost call this a super minority. And SRCX is of the opinion that Pierre Poilievre's political career is over. We shall see. In my last video, I'm of the opinion I did not listen to his concession speech or Mark Carney's or Jagmeet Singh's. I didn't listen to any. Um, I've heard it all before. From what I understand, I've seen a little bit of reporting on it, just headlines, and Poilievre is talking confident. It's not unprecedented for uh, an opposition leader or even for the prime minister. Going back in Canadian history, William Lyon Mackenzie King, most commonly referred to as Mackenzie King, on two occasions, he's the longest ever serving Prime Minister of Canada. And on two occasions, his party, the Liberals, were elected to government, but Mackenzie King twice lost his own seat and continued to operate as the Prime Minister from outside of the House of Commons, and then would eventually run in a by-election. Pierre Poilievre is going to face a leadership review. And from the tone that I'm seeing, at least in the headlines, and the rhetoric I'm hearing from a few talking heads in national broadcasts, um, there's an expectation, I think, that he will at least try to hang on. What happens is because the Conservatives failed to form government, the leader of the party is automatically subject to a leadership review. In the last two elections, in the last three, Stephen Harper lost, he resigned immediately. Andrew Scheer lost, resigned immediately. Aaron O'Toole lost, resigned immediately. It doesn't always happen. John Turner, the Liberal Party leader, lost to Brian Mulroney the first time back around 1984 and 1984, 85, in and around that area. And he went to a leadership review, and the Liberals voted to have him maintain his role as leader of the party. And Stephen Harper likewise lost his first election as leader of the Conservative Party against Paul Martin. Paul Martin won a minority, and the leadership review came out with the party supporting Stephen Harper remaining the leader of the party. So how will it end up? I mean, the first thing that will have to happen is one, Pierre Poilievre has to declare his firm intention to remain on as leader, and I think that's the case, that he is intending to remain on as leader, and he can do that. What will have to happen is, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. What will have to happen is that Poilievre will have to have one of his sitting members, someone in a safe conservative seat, resign their position. Typically, they're given a role within the party, they're given some plum job within the party. They join the party bureaucracy and they vacate their seat for the purposes of having a by election. And then the by election takes place. And then, if Pierre Poilievre picks a riding out in Alberta, which he has Alberta roots, then he can enter the House and resume his role as leader of His Majesty's official opposition. I still have to get used to saying that. So all my life it was Her Majesty. Now it's His Majesty. And we shall see what happens. Now, in terms of digesting the results, a lot of Canadians are like, how is the, a lot of conservative voters, and how many of us were there? According to 41.4% of Canadians voted conservative. And a lot of conservatives are saying, how did this happen? How is it possible? And I would ask you to consider this. 81% of Canadians went out and they rolled up their sleeves and they were told that after 2 doses, they would have long lasting, durable, robust protection against infection from you know what. And, just 2 shots and you cannot get infected and you cannot pass it along. And about 80 plus percent, over 80% of Canadians believed it. And they said, okay, great, this will be the end. And then after that 2 shots, so many people got sick. They found out and we found out about what they call breakthrough infections. Like it didn't work. So they came out with a booster. Got a booster now for you, made by the same people who made the first two. And 19 million Canadians, according to the data from Health Canada, 19 million Canadians decide, okay, I'll get another one. Maybe this one will work. And then we all know what happened. And so framing it that way, is it understandable that Canadians would look and they'd see our cratering economy and everything? And, well, maybe this will work. Maybe we'll try again. The Carney is the liberal booster. And that's where we are. And will it work? Now, one of the things I had said during many of my podcasts was that I was hopeful for a Conservative win. I was reticent and I didn't project it. I didn't proclaim it. I just said it was what I wanted. SRCX is of the opinion that the save millions and millions of lives. Okay, Donald Trump. Anyway, because that's what Donald says. He says he saved humanity because of his warp speed program. I never got it. And I got COVID once, February of 2022. And I've had worse colds. It was so funny. I've told the story many times on here, but you probably haven't heard it. I was outside a local pizza joint here in town. And Barry, a guy I used to go to church with, I saw him outside wearing a mask. And I said, he's outside wearing a mask. I'm like, Barry, you okay? And he said, oh man, I just had COVID. Oh, it just about killed me. I thought I was going to die. Oh, okay. And he said, well, thank God I got the jabs. Otherwise, probably would have done me in. And I said to him, this was probably March, April, May. And I said, yeah, I got it too. I had it back in February. And he said, oh, it was a killer, wasn't it? And I said, no, I've had worse colds. It was nothing. And he goes, oh, yeah, but you got that's because of the hokey pokey. He used the real word. And I said, no, I never got one. And his eyebrows just about shot off his head. Everyone I know who declined the jab is 100% fine. I know of too many people. I have a brother who at the time, 38-year-old brother-in-law, had a heart attack. 50-ish-year-old guy, friend of mine, John, massive stroke. A woman I went to church with had massive aneurysm. I don't know. I can't determine cause and effect. I just know that in my little tiny circle of people I know firsthand, and I can name just having severe health events happened. Mark, a guy here in town, a local counselor, massive heart attack. Luckily, he survived. 2 family members, strokes, just so many things. Now, again, I'm not saying cause and effect. Correlation does not prove causation. I know my science. I know the basics. But at the same time, correlation does not necessarily mean causation. It may not. Anyway, what SRCX is writing, the Kruger effect describes a cognitive bias where individuals with limited knowledge or skill in a specific area overestimate their competence. I think I've heard of that. This happens because they lack the self and then he got cut off You can only type so much into a message. I can't share the messages right now, populate them to the screen, because I'm going direct off YouTube. I'm not using StreamYard. That's what allows me to put the comments right up on the screen. And I'm doing that on purpose because StreamYard is a paid for service. And I'm using the free version, and you're only allowed so many hours a month. And I've already burned through I think it's 20 hours, and I've already burned through 3 hours, and I got to make them last until the 25th of May. So that's why. At any rate, so what's going to happen now? Uh, it looks to me, based on the numbers, I'll give it another quick look. I think this is what we're going to be looking at. It's possible one could flip, but whether I don't think the Liberals in any way, shape, or form can get up to 172. I don't think there are enough ridings. I went through, and on Global, they show you the close ridings. And all the close ridings, there's only one poll box left to open, and the leads are all in the hundreds, either for the Liberals or the Conservatives or even the NDP. In the very few seats the NDP won. So I think this is what we're looking at. So, and it's 168 for the Liberals, which, while not a majority, it becomes a de facto majority because of the fractured nature of the opposition. Uh, you would need the Pierre Poilievre from outside the legislature, assuming, there's so many question marks at this point. Will Poilievre decide to stay on? If he does stay on, will he survive a leadership review? Then, if he survives the leadership review, then he has to seek a seat in the legislature. A lot of what ifs that are going to play out right now, and we'll find out what happens. But leaving that aside, what are the Liberals going to do? What did the Liberals promise us? Now, Pierre Poilievre certainly had a lot of promises. He was going to, that are all out the window right now. He doesn't, in a fashion, he doesn't have the pressure of having to fulfill his campaign pledges. He had promised to reduce the size of the civil service through attrition, meaning when someone retires, leaves, they don't get replaced, or at least not all of them. That was one promise. He promised that for every dollar of spending that increase, that there would be a dollar cut, these types of things. But that's all out the window because he didn't win. He doesn't have to fulfill any campaign promises. What campaign promises does Mark Carney have to fulfill? Well, he promised to balloon the deficit. So he has promised that he's going to be spending like crazy. I forget the number. It's like over the next up to 2040, projecting adding another $250 million or something, I don't know, to the national debt, whatever it is, just a massive amount of spending to confront the crisis that we are in, and that's unfolding. That's how Mark Carney frames it. The country is in crisis, and I'm the only one who can save it. And Canadians endorsed him. I'm not here. You're not going to hear any conspiracy theories from me with respect to the vote total. You got to respect democracy. It is what it is. The Liberals won. And like I say, guys like SRCX and Donald Trump will tell you that the COVID jab saved millions and millions of lives. Not everyone agrees with that, but hey, Donald Trump's an expert. SRCX is an expert. They know everything. So Donald Trump type personalities abound in the world. I know everything. Okay, women's issues. No one knows more about women than me. Okay, everyone knows it. Every election, I call it right. I call it perfect. I'm great. I'm wonderful. Okay, military. I know more about the military than anybody. Okay, I get no credit, but that's okay. That's okay. I never do. At least, I've got 3 more years or so of doing my Donald Trump impression. Uh, can't do my Ronald Reagan anymore because half the people out there don't remember. Well, Ronnie here, and I'm here to tell you The 9 scariest words in the English language are I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And that's basically what Mark Carney is promising. He's going to spend like crazy, and we're going to be in a crisis, and it's going to be a bad time. So, in a fashion, he's set himself up in a way by just basically promised to heap on the debt. And in terms of debt, when you heap on the debt, how does government finance when it wants to expand and the revenues aren't there to support increased spending? Well, there are two ways, and I expect that Carney will employ both. Number one is increased taxation, and Carney has promised that he's going to be imposing a new carbon tax directly on companies based on their carbon output. So that'll be, big on the oil and gas companies. So we can expect prices at the pump to shoot back up. That's one way that you can help finance, and the other is to borrow. Just borrow, borrow, borrow. Already in Canada, we spend more on interest, just paying the interest on the debt, not paying it down at all, just making the interest payments. Think of it as your minimum monthly payment on a credit card. We're not even making the minimum monthly payment. We're doing interest only. And that interest payment is more than the federal government spends in healthcare or in defense or in infrastructure. If we had a federal department of interest payments, it would be the largest cabinet position. I'm minister of paying interest on the debt, and you'd have the biggest budget of any cabinet minister sitting at the table, and that's what we're facing. And unfortunately, we're in a situation where for the next 4 years, and goodness knows we'll see what unfolds. Um, even if Canadians get their back up again, and we go back to what it was like in December, and people go, wait a minute, Carney's just doing what Trudeau did. Well, we're stuck because there's no mechanism that I can see, not with the seat totals being what they are. The one thing Poilievre could do is he could continue to be, from outside the legislature. And I have Light Giver saying that Carney will be worse. We're heading on the same path we were on. We got a little reprieve ahead of the election. Back in December, Trudeau dialed back the wide open door immigration that had been going on, that saw, I think in the last fiscal year, somewhere in the neighborhood of 750,000 new arrivals came to Canada. Immigration ballooned to in and around 750,000. But knowing that an election was coming soon, while Trudeau was still there, he said, we're dialing that down. Carney, of course, is on record as saying that Canada needs to expand immigration. So we can expect that to get ratcheted back up. And likewise, again, with the carbon taxation, it got taken down to zero before the election. And then, but Carney, to his credit, I will give him credit. For this, at least he's warned us. He told us ahead of the election that he's going to be imposing new carbon taxation. So the climate's going to stop changing, people. If you if you tax Canadians, climate change stops. There are a lot of people who believe that Canada can save the world. If we stop emitting carbon, if we stop burning fossil fuels, if we get to this, panacea of net zero, that all of a sudden climate change will stop. And my non-expert opinion, based on what I have read and what I've listened to, is that climate will still change whether we burn fossil fuels or not. And what is the basis for that opinion? Because that's what climate does. And I've said it many times, but I'll repeat it again. 1000 to 1400, medieval warming period. Nobody was burning fossil fuels. No one was driving cars. No one was flying around in jet planes. But there was no industrialization back then. The Vikings were sailing off to Greenland and building settlements because, wow, it's green. The ice sheets have pulled back significantly. And then what did the Vikings do to stop climate change? Did they stop using plastic bags and straws? Did they kill off all their farting cows? I don't know. But climate change reversed. And we went from the medieval warming period where temperatures were climbing, and then around 1400, they started to go the other direction. We got into global cooling, and we entered a period that climatologists refer to as the Little Ice Age. And all this climate change, warming and cooling, happened with the human. The little, well, the little pause seemed to work. I got to remember that. I can do it again in the future. Maybe some of those who are watching will come back now, although the numbers now going down even lower. But anyway, I can at least continue with what I was saying. So for the next 4 years, this might as well be a majority government with the numbers being what they are, unless something unusual happens and the liberal total goes down, conservative Bloc Québécois numbers go up. We're looking at the liberals having basically a de facto majority. And they don't even have to they don't have to concern themselves with making deals. They don't have to make promises to the NDP as they did when Trudeau was prime minister. Trudeau was able to put through whatever legislation he wanted because the NDP had signed on to what they call a supply side confidence agreement, meaning that anytime a vote of confidence came up that could defeat the government and send Canadians to election, Jagmeet Singh and the NDP had pledged that they would vote with the government side, ensuring the government could survive. And I've got a number of worries. Number one, the crisis that I think Carney is going to bring upon Canadians because he's promised it. It's going to be bad, but don't worry, I'm here to save you. That's Mark. One piece of legislation worries me that kind of died with the call of the election, and that's the online harms bill that was split into two. And one aspect of it I'm okay with. I'm okay with the idea of protecting children and vulnerable people from predatory behavior online. Who would not be in favor of that? Mr. T is writing, I declare, let the Hunger Games begin. Well, if you go to Horizons Canada, which is it's a government department attached directly to the Prime Minister's office that makes prognostications about what Canadians are going to be facing in the world's in the years ahead. And this came out very late in the campaign. And what came out was that they're prognosticating some pretty scary times, talking about people foraging for food. Mark Carney, when he was with Brookfield, they invested heavily in modular homes. And now Mark Carney has said that he is going to address the housing crisis by establishing a new government department of housing, basically more bureaucracy. And they're going to purchase a whole bunch of mini homes, modular homes. And is he going to be buying them from the same company that Brookfield is invested in? We'll find out. We don't know precisely about potential conflicts of interests that Mark Carney has because, like Donald Trump in the United States, he's not big on disclosure. Donald he wouldn't reveal his tax returns, didn't want Americans to see them. And Trump voters didn't care. He's a smart guy. And Mark refused to disclose his financial assets to Canadians ahead of the election. And like Trump supporters in the United States, Canadian liberal supporters said, okay, I don't have to see them. I trust you. People trust Trump. They trust Carney. You trust this investment banker, Wall Street, Bay Street guy, Carney. He's probably more Wall Street than Bay Street because, after all, Brookfield, he was the one who sent a letter to shareholders urging them to move the head office, to vote in favor of moving the head office from Toronto to New York City. So he's a Wall Street guy. And if you think Wall Street has Main Street's interests in mind, well, fair enough. You probably think Donald Trump has the best interest of everyone, in mind too. Uh, we're in, and I was talking about the online harms bill. There's so as I say, predatory behavior online. I think I have no issue with that. If you enact legislation that will protect particularly, vulnerable populations like children from predatory behavior, bravo, no problem. But the other aspect that was separated out of it that Mark Carney has talked about bringing back is this idea of impaneling an unelected body to take complaints when people feel that they've been hurt. He said things I didn't like I on my channel frequently state biological reality. I state that there are two genders. There's male and there's female. There's XXXY. There's a multitude of personality types, but personality and gender are two different things. Uh, and just because someone likes to wear a dress doesn't change their gender. We used to call them transvestites, and it's something as old as human history. There have always been individuals who, boys and girls, who, even as children, they think, well, maybe I should have been born a boy, maybe I should have been born a girl. I'm not, I was born in the wrong gender. And Fred Rogers of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood wrote a fantastic song about it because, again, that's going back to the 60s, and it goes back further than that. It's as old as human history. It doesn't mean that just because, and I believe the technical term used to be referred to as gender dysphoria. I think I have that right. Gender confusion, for lack of a better word. Gender dysphoria sounds so intellectual. Gender confusion, old as human history. And but I'm of the opinion, and I'll state it boldly. I wouldn't preclude. I wouldn't want anyone censored for contradicting my opinion. I want to be free to express my opinion. I want others to be free to express their opinions. What scares me is this online harms bill, the portion of it, if it gets resurrected, they'll impanel a body, an unelected body appointed by the government to determine when people are being offended. And then, words hurt. Well, and the sad reality in this world is this, is that if you want to have meaningful discussion, you have to be willing to risk being offended, and you have to risk offending others. That's the only way you can have any meaningful discussion. If you want to go live in a totalitarian style country like China, for example, where promoting free speech and democracy gets you an arrest warrant is issued for you, even if you're a Canadian. Joe Tay, who was a conservative. I don't know if he won. I didn't check his riding, Don Valley North. He was running as a conservative in Don Valley North. The Conservatives, by the way, did very well in the 905 region. The Liberals actually lost seats in Ontario, and the Conservatives gained seats in Ontario. Where the Liberals really ran up was in Quebec, where the Bloc Québécois did not do as well as they were hoping, did not do as well as they had done in the previous election. If more Bloc members had been elected, we'd be looking at a much different parliament. But Quebecers, like in much of Canada, this became a very binary election. I finally got to see the results in my own riding. It remained conservative. And actually, Philip Lawrence, the conservative candidate for my riding, got dang near 50% of the vote. He got 49.7 my last check. However, the Liberal got 45. The NDP vote completely collapsed here, 3%. That's all they got. So even if you added the NDP, Green, and Liberal vote together in my riding, Philip Lawrence still would have won, but it would have been razor thin in that case, but he still would have won. The if you combined the PPC and the Conservative together, they actually combined got over 50% of the vote. So now in most elections, 45%, that's what Philip Lawrence won with last time. He won handily last time with in 2021 with 45% of the vote. This time he went up to 50, but the margin was much closer because everyone coalesced, all the anti-conservative vote all coalesced around the Liberals. Not enough to win, very rural riding, traditionally blue. However, in 2015, when Justin Trudeau won, the this riding did elect a Liberal Party member. Well, let's see. Mr. T is writing carbon tax, home equity tax will be back on. This is all on the table now. And it's going to be, and Carney can honestly say, well, I told you there's a crisis. This is the crisis. We have to confront it. And Carney is also equally, a la Donald Trump has been accused in the United States of bypassing democratic oversight, bypassing Congress, using, they call it in the US, executive measures, executive orders. Carney is talking about using emergency powers, the full emergency powers of the prime minister's office to confront this crisis. And this is the thing about crisis. When you declare something a crisis, you're able to circumvent normal democratic norms. We saw that during COVID. We're seeing it with Trump now, with his, moves that he's making. And he says, well, there's a fentanyl crisis. And so that allows me to do X, Y, Z. Carney is going to say there's an economic crisis. And so I can circumvent Parliament, although he doesn't have to now. If the numbers are what the numbers show, then he'll have the votes in the House of Commons to get it through. I see I have 13 people watching. Wow. You're welcome to fill up the live chat, everyone. Give me your thoughts, your views. If you're a liberal, that's okay. We're going to find out if Mark Carney is up to the task. Is he going to put the best interests of the Canadian people front and center? I have my doubts. I think Carney is very much beholden to the Chinese. He borrowed $250 million, $250 million from the Bank of China for Brookfield when he was chairman of the board there. And incidentally, I'm an old dino, 58 years old, going to be 59 this summer, born 66, Gen Xer, just the very early Gen Xer. The boomers are just ahead of me. Anyway, Real Tyrone is writing, Canada's cooked. I don't like to say that. I don't like to give in to fear. We got through COVID. We got through all that emergency stuff, SRCX, and his view of, his Trump-like view about the vaccine saving millions of lives, whatever. I don't agree with Trump on that score. There are some things I do like about Donald Trump, to be fair. Donald Trump recognizes the fabric of reality. There are men, there are women, and does not, well, he actually signed an executive order barring men from getting into a boxing ring and beating the crap out of women. And I agree with that. With that, I don't agree with him going all in on AI and digital currency and things like that. But I compartmentalize things. I realize no one is 100% good, no one's 100% evil. You may tilt more in one direction than the other. But in terms of Mark Carney, I do not think he is beholden to the best interests of Canadians. I don't think he's going to put Canada first. I think he will put his business interests, the Ghislaine Maxwells of the world, who he likes to rub elbows with. And that brings me back to the online harms bill. Am I going to get into trouble for talking openly and freely and controversially and expressing fringe views? Remember that? Oh, yeah. And you would get, and with Trudeau labeling individuals such as myself and saying, racist, misogynist, science denier, and all these pejorative labels were heaped on people like me. And could that happen again under Carney? Well, we're in a crisis. We can't afford to have dissenting opinions. So we need to put further restrictions on free speech in Canada. In the US, free speech is darn near absolute. You can't yell fire in a theater, crowded place. But freedom of speech is far more sacrosanct in the United States than it is here in Canada. In Canada, man, and you're hearing a lot from the left, from the so-called progressive left, about further, needs to restrict free speech. Well, so we're going to go backwards. We're not going to go forward. We're not going to allow free speech. That's a worry for me. And is it a hill I'm willing to die on? I've got. I want to say yes, but it's one of those things where you cross that bridge when you get to it. We'll see. Um, it's easy to talk all brave and rah, in the abstract. But when things hit you right in the face, that's when you find out. Um, what's real Tyrone writing? He's writing a bunch of things. So is Mr. T. Another liberal government is going to kill Canada and Canadians. We'll see. We'll see. It was not the result I wanted to see. I'm not going to hide my disappointment. I do think Pierre Poilievre should hang on. He did an amazing job. It's not his fault that the NDP cratered in any other election, getting 41 plus percent, 41, 42% of the popular vote. And you're going to have a super minority or probably a majority. Brian Mulroney, back in the day when it was Conservative, Liberal, NDP, three parties, this is before the Bloc Québécois even came along, 42%, that won him a majority in and around 42%. And that's what Poilievre got. But in this parliament, the NDP vote collapsed. My riding just 3%. I think it's 6 point something percent nationally. Normally, you would expect the NDP to punch somewhere in and around 15. Like they went down by 2/3 from what would be a normal average expectation. Jagmeet Singh buried that party, and most of the vote, sadly, hardworking union member Canadians, that's traditionally the NDP support, and the youth. Young people are very idealistic. Marxism is very attractive when you're young because, it's all rainbows and unicorns. And then reality hits, and you start to realize that, what? Life is never going to be perfect. And there's an old saying that the perfect is the enemy of the good. And we've seen that play out so many times, is that, there are always problems. And so it's always easy for the opposition to look and say, look, this is everything that's wrong. There's always stuff that's wrong. Mr. T is writing, I hope I am wrong. Carney will line the pockets of Brookfield and its stakeholders on our accounts. I mean, if we find out that Canada is investing heavily into mini homes so that we can accommodate millions of more newcomers coming in every year, crowding out the housing market and impoverishing our kids, we'll find out whether the modular homes Canada buys, are they the same ones that Brookfield invested in? Wouldn't be nice to have known that before the election, but he wouldn't divulge his assets. Uh, Real Tyrone, I'll take you at he's writing that our GDP, gross domestic product, is, I think you're 0.5. I think you're talking about the growth rate, which is pathetic. We are of the world's 20 largest economies. We're number 20. We're number 20. If Canada was a U.S. state, we'd be on a par with Mississippi. That's how well Canada's doing. We're rocking it like Mississippi economically. Man, oh man. Uh, and well, no, real Tyrone is saying that that loan that he took out for Brookfield, no, Brookfield will pay that back, but I'm sure Carney will make sure that Brookfield's the assets they have in their portfolio, like coal, he'll make sure that Canadian LNG and our oil, that it stays in the ground by and large, and that we only sell it to the US. I don't believe we're going to see any pipelines built, not so long as Bill C-69 stays in place, which the regulations are so onerous that phase one is that in the legislation, phase one is designed to be completed within 180 days, but no project has gotten out of phase one, and some have been in there for more than 300 days. So it talks about 180 days, but what's the reality? 300 plus days, and you're still not out of phase one. And Real Tyrone expect the Emergencies Act to be implemented soon. We shall see. Economic turmoil, well, emergency measures are needed. And Carney has promised to employ the full emergency powers of the office of Prime Minister to confront this crisis we're in. So could we be seeing, the Constitution and your Charter of Rights and Freedoms, we'll shred it again. We'll put it back through the shredder. And your right to freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. Sorry, it's an emergency. We can't afford any dissenting voices. This democracy doesn't work anymore. We need authoritarian stuff. And when you scare a population, when the population is scared, why did people line up to get, they got the first two, they got two, and they were told that after those two, you'll have long-lasting, robust protection from infection. Cannot get infected after two. And hey, I'm scared of it, so give me. And then when they found out it didn't work, that breakthrough infections weren't rare, they were common, then they said, well, we got a booster for you. And at least according to Health Canada data, 19 million Canadians say, okay, I'll get the booster. Yeah. And here's the situation we are in politically. Well, Mark Carney is the booster shot. Is he going to be, and just as the booster shot was just as effective as the first two, Carney is going to be just as effective as Trudeau, because they were basically, he's going to follow the same agenda. Man, for early in the morning, right now 5:40. So let me read what's being written. Sorry, I can't populate it to the screen, but it is what it is. The Loving Heapful is writing, it's the Indians that Trudeau brought into our cities that won this election for Carney. A lot of East Indians, I prefer saying East Indians. My wife, incidentally, is Tamil, okay? Voted Conservative. I was at Easter Sunday dinner. And my wife has two nephews, both in and around 20. My nephews-in-law, I guess. My sister-in-law's kids. She has three, two of them voting age, both at university, Guelph. And I said, are you guys voting? And they said, oh, yeah. And I said, and they said, Poilievre, No prompting from me. I didn't say, "Are you going to vote Poilievre?" All I asked is, "Are you voting?" They both said, "Oh yeah, for Poilievre." So a lot of the East Indian community is voting Conservative. Trust me on that. Um, it's actually the boomer class, the 70 plus year olds who are heavy in for the Liberal Party because more government money and bring people in and inflate the housing market even more. So screw you, it's a, I got mine, screw the kids. And the thing is, boomers vote. Probably 70, 80, 90%. I don't know, 80% of boomers go out and vote. When you talk to 20, 25-year-olds, a lot of them don't vote. And those that do, a lot of times they're in love with Marxism. They love this idea of, the means, the government should own the means of production and everyone should be an employee of the government. The government will take care of everything. So, the kids who are voting, a lot of them lean left. You've heard the old bromide. This is a quote that is attributed to Winston Churchill, but there's no record of him ever saying it. But it's still a good quote, whoever said it. And the saying is this: if you're 20 and you're not liberal, you have no heart. Because these kids aren't bad kids. They're altruistic. They think, rainbows and unicorns. They think everyone, and that the government is an agent for good. And that bureaucracy, they don't understand bureaucracy yet. They don't understand how government mucks things up yet. They'll learn. So they say if you're not a liberal by the time you're 20, well, then you have no heart. But if you're not a conservative by the time you're 40, then you have no brain. And we got a lot of boomers right now, though, who are voting heavily liberal and not enough young kids to counter them off. 4 years from now, there will be less boomers around. They're entering the end of natural life expectancy. So let me see what else is being written. Um, no, real Tyrone, no. Pierre Poilievre did not win his riding. So he will be the leader of the official opposition from outside the House. Um, Early indications, my impression is that he's going to try and hang on as leader of the Conservative Party. He is subject to an automatic leadership review if he decides to stay on. Usually, typically, not always, but typically what happens is once a leader loses an election, liberal or conservative, or even NDP, although not so much NDP, but liberals, conservatives, when someone loses, the leader of the party more often than not resigns. Not always. I cited earlier examples. John Turner lost to Brian Mulroney, but he stayed on. Stephen Harper lost to Paul Martin, but he stayed on. Poilievre, early indications, my impression, are that he is going to try and hang on, but he is subject to what is called a leadership review. So he says, I'm going to remain as the leader. And then what happens is every card carrying member of the Conservative Party of Canada then gets to vote on whether they want Pierre Poilievre to remain as the leader or whether they want him to go. And provided he gets 70 or more percent of the vote in favor of him staying, then he can safely stay on. If he gets below 66, where you have a third of the party, a third saying we don't want you as the leader anymore, then it gets dicey because technically he only needs 50%, but practically in the historical precedent is that less than 66 and you go to a leadership review, or rather you call for a leadership convention. And then Pierre Poilievre could run to try and re-win his old position, or he could back out. I mean, I'm an old dino, I'm a big time political follower. I remember it. That happened with Joe Clark. Joe Clark, after he lost the 1980 election to Pierre Elliott Trudeau, he decided to stay on. The leadership review took place, and he got around 67%. He was right in that gray area. And he decided that he would call for a leadership convention and that he would run, thinking he would win. And Brian Mulroney was encouraging him to do it. Meanwhile, what Brian Mulroney was doing was preparing his own leadership bid. And then when Clark called the leadership convention, Mulroney threw his hat into the ring, and then Mulroney courted a lot of Quebec separatists to come and join the Conservative Party, and he was able to win the leadership. And he did that by bringing into the Conservative Party of Canada what was then the Progressive Conservative Party. He brought in guys like Lucien Bouchard, who had been a separatist, but Mulroney said, "Look, I'll make a deal with you. I'll amend the Constitution so we can get your signature, and we will make concessions. We'll recognize you as a distinct society. We'll give you rights and privileges that other provinces don't have." And both the Meech Lake Accord and later the Charlottetown Accord failed to be ratified by the provinces. You have to get 7 out of 10 of Canada's provinces, representing 50% or more of the population, to ratify it. So and that happened in the provincial legislatures, and it didn't get through. And so ultimately it died. And then Lucien Bouchard stabbed Brian Mulroney in the back in a fashion. He'd brought him in, but then Brian Mulroney didn't live it up to his end of the bargain. He didn't get that Meech Lake or Charlottetown Accord through. And so the Bloc Québécois was born. So let me read. Alex believes liberals are detached from reality. I don't think they're detached from reality. I just think, as I'm going back to that metaphor about, getting the booster. They think Mark Carney's the booster. This one will work. And I think they're in for a rude awakening. It's one thing that Mark Carney is promising a crisis and that, emergency measures are going to be needed and all this stuff. It'll be a different story when it's actually right down on top of us. And I'm going to be saying to people, well, this is what you voted for. He said there'd be a crisis. Here it is. He said it, emergency measures. Here they are. Go move into your modular home. Brought to you by Brookfield. I can envision all kinds of scenarios. So real Tyrone, unfortunately, I wish he had won his riding. It was disgusting that there were 91 candidates on the ballot. Why? The kid or the organization that wants to protest the fact that Justin Trudeau didn't fulfill his election promise to end first past the post voting. That apparently is the rationale behind cramming 90 candidates onto a ballot, registering all these extra candidates. It was a protest over Justin Trudeau's failure to deliver on his 2015 first thing he said. One of the first things he said when he won a majority government in 2015, he said, "This is the last election Canadians will ever have with first past the post voting." And that was encouraging for a lot of people. A lot of people want proportionate representation. If we had proportionate representation, I wonder what it would look like. I got to look at the results of the election again. Let me see if I can find the results. There we go. So that would mean that the Liberals would have 43.5% of the seats in the House of Commons. The Conservatives would have 41.4. Let's make it 44 to 41. The Bloc Québécois would get 6% of the seats, and the New Democrats would get 6% of the seats. And it would be a different makeup to our House of Commons. That's what Trudeau promised, that we were no longer going to do this first past the post. And So to protest, who did they target? Pierre Poilievre. He never promised it. Trudeau did. Should have gone into Carney's riding, but whatever. It's legal. Yeah. Um, just going to read through and then I'll call it a night. And Alex Woods, no problem. I love the comments. They animate me. They make my live streams enjoyable for me. I enjoy this. I learn stuff doing this because quite often you guys have thoughts, views, opinions, or you've come across a tidbit of news that I haven't, and it's enlightening for me. So thank you very much. And I will invite you. I'm a bare bones basic. I'm an old 58-year-old military veteran, left the forces June of 2021. And I left because I wasn't getting that. And I knew it was coming. I knew they were going to force it. You don't have to be Nostradamus to figure some things out. They'd done it before with malaria. I knew they would force the shot. And there was no way on God's green earth that I was going to take a pharmaceutical product that had been developed at quote unquote warp speed. I know what warp speed is. It's science fiction. It's the idea of bending the fabric of space and time. Works in Star Trek, but Star Trek ain't reality. So there's no way I'm getting that. But if I'd stayed in and refused the shot, then I could have been charged with disobeying a lawful order. So sorry, I'm wearing an old army t-shirt right now, the Desert Tan. Uh, I'm trying to catch up. Okay. Eat Me's writing, I heard Andrew Lawton from True North and Aaron Gunn won their ridings, circonscription. I love these French words, multisyllabic. So two more seats for the Conservative. Yeah, they did very well. The reason they lost, Poilievre did an amazing job. 42, 41, 42% popular vote. It's amazing. Harper would have loved that. And, he ran 4 election campaigns. He would have 4 or 5. He would have loved to be punching up around 42%. He would have had multiple majorities. But the NDP vote completely collapsed. And I don't, maybe someone here knows, but I don't see an heir apparent to this. I got a lot of grief on my YouTube channel back, December, January, when I was speculating that because the chatter was out there that Mark Carney was waiting in the wings. And I said, if he comes in, becomes the leader, be careful what you wish for. Trudeau resigns, Mark Carney comes in. I said he may be able to resurrect Liberal fortunes enough to knock the Conservatives down to a minority, or conceivably even win power. And my message feed got filled up with "You're crazy. Canadians are not dumb enough to elect another Liberal government." Blah 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 blah. I said, I never underestimate the stupidity of Canadians writ large, the mass. Like I said, 19 million Canadians after getting after believing the story that, hey, 2 doses and you're going to be good, long lasting, robust protection from infection. Okay, I'll get the 2. Well, now one more, just one more, and it'll be good. Okay, 19 million said, okay, that was wrong, but you'll be right this time. And then I don't know how many got another one after that, and another one, and another one. They started recommending them every 6 months. And now basically hardly any, I think we're down, last I checked, it was less than 15% of Canadians had stayed up to date. They just basically said, I'm done. I'm not going to write down pincushion as a life skill on my resume. Let me read. Um, the loving, hateful, newfangled citizen shouldn't be able to vote. I think that in order to vote, you should have to pass a civics test. Yeah. When does a piece of legislation become law? Is it after it's signed by the prime minister? True or false? Does a law in Canada become law after the prime minister signs it? True or false? And the answer is false. A law doesn't become law in Canada until it is signed by the governor general. That's called royal assent. And the vast majority of Canadians, a large percentage, and many of them voting, don't even know that. Now, I did study poli-sci, political science at university, so maybe I have a little more knowledge than the average, but geez, this is basic stuff. And it's the way our government functions. You have first reading, second reading, you get a vote, House of Commons. If the House of Commons passes it, it goes to the Senate, rinse and repeat, can go through committee hearings, et cetera, et cetera. If they approve it, then it goes to Governor General. Governor General has to give the rubber stamp signature. We have a parliamentary democracy. The head of state, titular head of state, is King Charles, but he's not going to sign all our legislation. So his representative, the Governor General, I think her name is Simon, she signs it on his behalf. Um, and then Alex is running. I used to vote for Jack Layton, however, I became conservative. To me, in this election with Pierre Poilievre, that was the logical choice for me. I'm an individual who I've moved all over. I voted Liberal, I voted NDP, I voted Conservative. I've lived in Quebec, la ville de Québec. J'étais muté à Valcartier quand j'étais posté là pour je travaillais en quartier escadron des transmissions QGET, quartier général escadron des transmissions. Et puis, suite à ça, 5e ambulance de la campagne. Yeah, I'm bilingual, pretty much. But eat me. Man, if I get 2 hours of sleep today, I'll be lucky. I decided what the heck, I'll go on. I bet you I'm not the only one burning the midnight oil, fixating on the results, which, by the way, haven't changed from when I shared my screen. Yeah, 168 for the Liberals, 144 for the Conservative, 23 for the Bloc Québécois, 7 for the New Democrats, 1 for the Green. And 43.5% of the popular vote for the Libs, 41.4 for the Conservative. The New Democratic Party down at 6%. Unbelievable. And then Alex is saying that family was pushing him to vote NDP. However, he was always conservative. And that family has a big influence. I was talking with someone earlier today. I was talking to a lot of young kids at work. After leaving the army, I did nothing until it was COVID times. I left the army in June of 2021. And by the fall, we had the vaccine passport. I'm unvaxxed. I can't even go have a coffee. And so I did nothing until 2022. And then I started working in a large retail establishment. I don't like to name it. I don't want to name my current employer. Although I talk to people every day. It's a busy place, 100 plus people a day, maybe 200. And I'm very friendly, outgoing. I talk to people. I'm one of these touchy guys. When I talk to someone, I like to put my hand on their shoulder. It's amazing the interactions you can have with people. I've come across so many people who are suffering. I spoke to a woman yesterday whose son was 50, about 50 years of age, and died with, he just had been healthy when the doctor had stomach issues, told he had stage 4 cancer. He didn't even know he had it, and bang, it's at stage 4. Obviously a very aggressive cancer. What caused it? I don't know. I don't have a medical degree, so I'm not even going to speculate. I have my thoughts, but I'm not going to share them. And I've known too many cases of people developing an autoimmune conditions like celiac disease. Unbelievable, the number of people coming down with this stuff. I don't know what's causing it. It's gotta be something in the air, maybe. Maybe maybe it's goodness knows. Um, and I like what Real Tyrone is writing. Canada needs we need to improve our birth rate. The fertility rate in Canada is about 1.4 last I checked, and that's far below what we need just to maintain our population. Uh, and that's why we need immigration. And Canadians, we are. We got to admit it. We're selfish. Kids are, well, have one, have two, and then we're done. And a lot. And then you got the dinks, double income, no kids, people who don't want kids, and it's because we're a very affluent society. And you look at the poor countries in the world, developing nations, and you go to sub-Saharan Africa, the birth rate is through the roof. And people say, why are they having so many kids when they can't afford? Well, one, their limited access to birth control is one problem. But another problem, or another reason why impoverished nations have such high birth rates, is for people, it's an expression of self-worth. I'm the Tenge Marumbo or whatever the name. I'm living in sub-Saharan Africa, and I live in a hut. I live in a tent. I don't own a car. I don't go on vacations. But look, I got these 14 kids. These are my kids. It's an expression of self-worth. Whereas in the Western world, Canadians will say, see me, this is my house. Here's my car. Here's my, check my phone. I got my pictures from when I went to Jamaica or Cuba or Dominican. And that's an expression of identity. And so um, we're selfish. Kids are amazing. I have three. And, it's too late now, but I wish I had more, honestly. Um, what's Alex writing? The Qatari, Trump, Carney, Ivana, Jared Kushner Company, Brookfield Asset Management, Company Connection. Canadian, there wasn't enough time. There wasn't enough time. There is a term called cognitive dissonance. And what tends to happen is people tend to make up their mind very quickly. And I couldn't get over the amount of angst and fear. I work in a retail establishment, and people, I gotta buy Canadian. Oh my gosh, Trump wants to take us over. And there was among some people, there was palatable fear. And then Mark Carney comes along, governor of the Bank of England, governor of the Bank of Canada, UN advisor, uh, Goldman Sachs. Oh, this guy is going to be great. And they immediately go all in. Okay. They go all in. They say, okay, Mark Carney. And they've decided. And then this is where cognitive dissonance comes in. We find out he sent a letter to shareholders urging them to move. And we're talking December of 2024, just a few months ago. Sent a letter urging Brookfield shareholders to vote in favor of moving the head office from Toronto to New York City. And someone says that, well, maybe that could be fake news. I'm not letting go of my initial, I've married myself to my initial opinion. And it takes time for how many people kept going for a booster and another one, another, and slowly it takes time for people to wake up and smell the coffee. And that's why Mark Carney chose a 36-day election cycle, because smartly, he knew that the more people got to know him, the more they'd let go of that initial impression they got from CBC, CTV, and Global News. So he, shortest time possible. The Conservatives were on the climb. This election had gone on for another week or two, we'd be looking at a Conservative government, because Carney was on the way down, Poilievre was on the way up, but there wasn't enough time. Carney made sure that he could have had an election in Canada, minimum 36, maximum 51. minimum 36, max 51. And he picked the shortest possible because he knew the more Canadians got to know him, the more problems they would see. And he had just gotten elected, coronated, all over the news, 86% of the vote, 14-year-old Liberal Party members and non-Canadian residents allowed to be Liberal Party members and participate in the voting process. 86%. So that's great. And then he gets on a wide-body jet and he flies to England and into France and shakes hands with Starmer and with Macron, and he's at the top of the news feed. And so people are, I'm all in on that Mark Carney guy. Yeah. And then they slowly wake up. What's this with him with Ghislaine Maxwell? That's Jeffrey Epstein's old girlfriend. She's in jail now. When was that picture taken? 2013. We already knew what a slime ball she was. What's he doing hanging out with her? Oh my God. Well, wait a minute. Okay, Mark says that he was hanging around with her because Ghislaine Maxwell and his wife are longtime friends. Great. But people, cognitive dissonance, they won't let go of that. It takes a long time to get them to shake away from that initial impression they had. Real Tyrone is still unvaccinated. Me too, for COVID. I've had MMR, I've had polio, I've had tetanus, I've had all of them. Somewhere in this pile of stuff is my old military vaccination record. And I actually considered carrying it around because I don't own a cell phone, so I couldn't have the Vax Pass. And I thought of carrying it around and trying to go to a restaurant or something and saying, "What, you want to see my vaccination record from the Army?" And, do it in a fashion to maybe have them go, "No, no, it's okay," but I never did because that would be a lie by omission. And I'm a Christian, and one of, thou shalt not bear false witness, and lies of omission are lies. And I can't say I'm not guilty of it. Can't say I've never done it, but I try is the best I can put it. Miss T saying, it looks like I'm staying awake for the rest of the night, suffering from post-election blues syndrome, red syndrome now. Um, and Real Tyrone is unjabbed and proud. God bless you. I hope you're subscribed. I love, people who were smart enough to see through it. Most have seen through it now, but those of us who were able to see through it from the start. I mean, I started gathering. I was still in the army when COVID broke out in March, April 2020, and I started going to church up in Peterborough because I found a congregation that was meeting without any of the garbage. And they were doing it, they weren't quiet about it, but they weren't advertising it. They weren't like James Coates or Art Pulowski and getting a lot of publicity. Alex Kloosterman, Hill City Baptist, they did it on, again, a little bit on the down low. Although Alex, I met him at a protest rally in Peterborough where Randy Hillier and Maxime Bernier showed up, and Alex Kloosterman went up and gave a speech and a wonderful sermon too, talking about, he's not afraid of COVID. I worship the man who said, I've come to declare liberty for the captives, freedom for the slaves, freedom from oppression, da da da. And the crowd, he delivered it so well. The applause just as he went through each of the points when Jesus started his public ministry, quoting from the book of Isaiah. And the crowd just got louder and louder. And I bet you 50 or more people showed up at church the next Sunday. Um, and Real Tyrone likes the fact that Quebec voted for the non-French speaker. I'll give Carney some credit. I don't like the man. Can't stand him, to be quite frank. However, in fairness, his French, je parle comme quelqu'un qui parle français, pas pire qu'un anglophone, un hostie tête carrée, je débrouille en français. And Mark Carney, il n'est pas trop pire. He's not that bad. He pronounces things reasonably well. He says gouvernement. He doesn't, a lot of Anglophones, we say gouvernement. Quand vous travaillez pour le gouvernement, and it's gouvernement. There's a government, gouvernement, not government. It's government, not government. And then, anyway, minor things. But Carney wasn't bad. He obviously worked very hard at it. And he's, in and around my age. And really probably learning it, having to deal in it on a daily basis for the first time in his life. So I'll give him some marks there. And I think it played well. I think the fact, remember we had Stephen Harper, and Stephen Harper's French was no great shakes, but he, like Carney, managed to get it to a decent level. So Harper was better than Carney is, but Harper had a longer time to work at it. Yeah, so yeah. Mr. T is saying, I hope PP stays on, Pierre Poilievre. I will support him whenever he runs next. Very good. We'll see what happens. I'll be doing more videos in the days ahead. Eat Me is asking, can he boot a candidate to stay in Parliament? It won't go down that way. Someone in Alberta is my guess, or Saskatchewan, a very safe Conservative seat, will be asked to step aside. And someone will, and they'll be given a job within the party. And if he decides to stay on, that's how it will unfold. I'm 99% sure. It doesn't have to be in Alberta. It could be, there are safe Liberal ridings in Ontario. This Giovanni guy in Oshawa North might be a guy. We'll see. I'm trying to catch up, and then DM Andy is asking a question: if he were to step down, or if he does, who would I like as the new Conservative leader? That's a good, who would be running? I imagine Andrew Scheer might throw his hat back in the ring. I think he has aspirations in that way. Michelle Rempel Gardner would be another that I think would throw their hat into the ring. I think you might see an old name from the past, Jason Kenney. I wonder if he might take a stab. Some are speculating Doug Ford. God help me. I cannot stand Doug Ford. In the most recent Ontario election, I didn't vote. I didn't have anything to vote for. I hate Doug Ford. An old high school drug dealer, and that, look it up. Just type into Google, go Doug Ford, drug dealing, Etobicoke High School. He and his brothers dealt cash. Unbelievable. And no, so please, but his name is being punted. Who would I like? I like Michelle Rempel Gardner. That, I think a female would be good, because the Conservatives have only ever had one female leader, Kim Campbell, ran one election. She was prime minister. She took over from Brian Mulroney. I think a woman would be good. The Liberal Party, the Progressive Party, never once did they have a liberal or a woman leader, not one. I'm going to remind you, I thank you for the 12 likes. Anyone not subscribed, I'm going to just mention it again. It's what you're supposed to do as a YouTuber. And Alex, getting back to the jab, a lot of people were forced to quit over that. And he bit the bullet, sadly. And Alex is tapping out. Good having you on. Appreciate you chatting. And Alex only has one kid and doesn't think he can afford another. Sloop Dupe is a 29-year-old who builds roof trusses and is having a child for the first time later this year and hardly slept at all. Um, and what's Rosanna? So Rosanna Salzano. I got to speak Italian now. Rosanna Salzano. Alberta separate now before it's too late. Look at England, it's fallen to Islam. Canada's next. That's the fear. That is the fear. And I'm somewhat surprised that the NDP did as badly as they did, given that Jagmeet Singh was trying to, he's not Islamic, the turban notwithstanding, he's Sikh. That's the way you're supposed to pronounce it. Sikhism, that's the faith. Most Canadians say Sikh. Anyway, his stance on the Palestinian cause and everything. We're seeing all these huge rallies in Ottawa with the Palestinian flag and from the river to the sea and everything. And Jagmeet Singh was the only federal leader fully embracing the Islamic movement, and yet they didn't come out for him. And there are writings, maybe that may have played to the fact that they did win 7 seats with only 6% of the vote. They may have had, some downtown Vancouver ridings with a significant Islamic population. And Peace Fighters is quoting from John 2:17. Excellent, and this is a reminder we all need. I know that most watching are probably not people, not individuals of faith, and I do get that. Christians that oftentimes throughout, our long history, we're often our own worst enemies. We're judgmental, holier than thou, and all the rest. And but faith is important, especially in difficult times. That's why, the Bible is a huge comfort for me. I haven't been in it the past few days. Normally, I'm in it daily. And there are passages I can quote from memory. 23rd Psalm, most will know it. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff comfort me. There's a lot of peace to be found from Scripture. Anyway, what is John 2:17? The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever. Live honest, live faithful, live true. You know, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. Recognize your own failings. The hardest part in this world that we have is that people refuse to recognize their own sin. We live in a world of sate your every desire, fill your boots. That's an old army expression. Um, and I have Peace Fighter saying, "Where did I get the chart at the start of the live stream?" I'll put a link. I still have it right here. There it is. And I'll end off showing it again, sharing my screen. So there it is. That's CBC. But it doesn't matter what you look at. My little box is blocking it. So there you go. So 43.5, 41.4. Normally 41, 42%, you'd be in majority territory. But the NDP crapped out. And 168, I'm combining the Conservative bloc together. It's not enough to defeat any legislation they put forward. So even if the Liberals lose a member to becoming the Speaker of the House, still just needs to get either the Green or the NDP, and he's got enough. So whatever Mark Carney wants to do, he's going to do. Thank you for watching. I'm going to tap out now. 6:30 in the morning coming up. My time zone, Eastern. You see the sun coming up at my back. God bless. Um, I'm looking at Sloop, who's writing, as I've gotten older and the world gets bleaker, I find myself slowly shifting towards faith. My girlfriend is religious, and it may be what we need to get through this next period of life. And thank you to everyone showing up. And I hope Rosanna, I hope I didn't offend you with, I like doing accents. I do them I've got my DNA is from all over the place. I'm Irish, English, Scottish, Welsh. Uh, Unfortunately, I'm not working today, so good news. I like to end my videos with a blessing. It's from the book of Numbers. And these are words that Aaron, who was kind of a priest, that he spoke over God's covenant chosen people. And when I'm in church, the pastor will often say these as a benediction as we're leaving. And I take so much comfort from them. I raise my hands out and I go, just let these words wash over me. And I'm nothing special. I'm not a pastor or anything like that. But the words are special. May the Lord bless and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you, even in dark times. And may the Lord grant you peace. And you can find that peace. You can get into his word. So God bless. Um, and we'll probably see you late tonight. If you want to come on, hit the subscribe button and the bell, and you get notified. All right. Stop sharing, and I'm ending the stream. Good night, all, or good morning.